The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, a sharp electric jolt that sliced through the stillness of the house. Daniel froze, his hand hovering over the cutting board, the knife glinting under the fluorescent light. The text glowed on the screen, stark and unapologetic. "I'm a free woman, stop tracking me." His chest tightened, as if the air had thickened into molasses. 12 minutes later, another message. A photo of Claire, his wife of 7 years, laughing in a dimly lit bar, her head tilted toward a man whose face was just out of frame. The timestamp seared into his mind. 9:47 p.m. The knife slipped, nicking his thumb, and a bead of blood welled up, vivid red against the pale wood. Daniel's breath hitched as he stared at the phone, the words blurring. Claire's text wasn't just a statement. It was a blade, cold and deliberate, carving through the fragile trust they'd stitched together after months of arguments and silences. He'd installed the tracking app on her phone last year, not out of suspicion but fear. Her late-night drives home from the hospital where she worked as a nurse had always made him uneasy. She'd agreed reluctantly, her hazel eyes narrowing with a flicker of resentment. Now her words mocked him, accusing him of control he'd never wanted. But the photo, her smile, unguarded, intimate, felt like a confession he wasn't ready to hear. He sank into a chair, the wood creaking under his weight, and swiped to enlarge the image. The bar's neon glow cast shadows across Claire's face, highlighting the curve of her cheek, the way her hair fell loose, no longer tied back in the practical bun she wore at work. The man's hand rested on the table, close to hers, a gold watch catching the light. Daniel's stomach churned. He knew that watch. Mark, her colleague, the cardiologist with a laugh that filled rooms and a habit of lingering too long at her side during hospital fundraisers. Daniel had dismissed it as camaraderie, rationalizing the late-night texts, the work drinks that stretched past midnight. But now doubt gnawed at him, sharp and relentless. The house felt too quiet, the hum of the fridge amplifying the absence of Claire's usual presence. Her soft humming, the clink of her coffee mug, the rustle of her scrubs as she rushed out the door. Daniel's mind raced, replaying their last conversation. She'd been distant, her voice clipped as she mentioned a late shift. "Don't wait up," she'd said, avoiding his eyes. He'd nodded, ignoring the unease that had settled in his gut like a stone. Now he wondered if she'd been lying then too. He typed a reply, fingers trembling. "Where are you?" No response. The silence stretched, heavy, suffocating. He opened the tracking app, half expecting it to be disabled, but her location blinked. A bar downtown, the Rusty Anchor, a place she'd once called tacky and overpriced. The contradiction stung. Why there? Why with him? His thumb hovered over the call button, but pride or fear stopped him. Instead, he grabbed his keys, the metal cold against his palm, and headed for the door. The photo burned into his mind. The city streets blurred past, headlights streaking like comets in the rain-slicked night. The Rusty Anchor's neon sign flickered as he pulled into the lot, its red glow bleeding into the puddles on the asphalt. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and the low thrum of jazz. Daniel scanned the crowd, his heart pounding, until he spotted her in a corner booth. Claire's laugh carried over the music, bright and unguarded, her hand brushing Mark's as she leaned closer. Daniel's throat tightened, the scene unfolding like a slow-motion crash, every detail sharp, every sound amplified. He approached, his shoes sticking to the tacky floor, and Claire's eyes met his. For a moment time stopped. Her smile faltered, then hardened, a mix of defiance and guilt. Mark turned, his expression shifting from surprise to something unreadable. Pity, maybe, or triumph. "Daniel," Claire said, her voice steady but laced with something brittle. "What are you doing here?" "You told me to stop tracking you," he said, his words rough, raw. "So I came to see for myself." The bar seemed to fade, the noise dimming as he focused on her face, searching for the woman he'd married, the one who'd cried in his arms after a patient died, who'd danced with him in their kitchen to a song only they knew. She was still there, wasn't she? Mark stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "This isn't what you think," he said, but his voice lacked conviction, and his eyes darted to Claire for rescue. She didn't look at him. Instead, she stared at Daniel, her lips parting as if to speak, then closing again. The silence was louder than any confession. "Claire," Daniel said, softer now, pleading. "Tell me I'm wrong." His voice cracked, betraying the hope he clung to, the part of him that still believed in her. But her eyes dropped to the table, and in that moment he knew. The truth was in the way her fingers curled around her glass, the way she wouldn't meet his gaze. It wasn't just a drink, a laugh, a moment. It was months of secrets, of late-night texts he'd ignored, of her pulling away while he pretended not to notice. "I didn't want this," she whispered finally, her voice barely audible over the jazz. "I didn't mean for it to happen." The words were a gut punch, confirmation of what he'd feared but refused to believe. He wanted to scream, to demand why, to shake her until the answers spilled out. But all he could do was stand there, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on him, heavy as the rain outside. "Then why did it?" he asked, his voice low, dangerous. Mark shifted, ready to intervene, but Claire raised a hand, stopping him. The gesture was intimate, proprietary, and it cut deeper than her words. Daniel's hands clenched, nails biting into his palms. He wanted to hate her, to hate Mark, but all he felt was a hollow ache, a grief for something already lost. "I felt trapped," she said, her eyes meeting his now, glistening with tears. "You were always there, watching, worrying. I needed space, Daniel. I needed to feel like me again." Her words were a mix of confession and accusation, each one twisting the knife deeper. He'd thought he was protecting her, loving her. Had he smothered her instead? The bar's neon flickered, casting her face in alternating light and shadow. Daniel saw the truth now. Not just her betrayal, but his own failures, the ways he'd ignored her quiet pleas for freedom. He wanted to forgive her, to pull her close and pretend this night never happened. But the photo, the watch, her laugh, they were anchors, dragging him into reality. He turned to leave, the air too thick to breathe. "Daniel," she called, her voice breaking. He paused, his back to her, waiting for something, anything that could undo this. But she said nothing more, and the silence was her final answer. Outside, the rain soaked through his jacket, cold against his skin. His phone buzzed again, another text from Claire. "I'm sorry." He stared at it, the words blurring through the rain and his own tears. 12 minutes ago she'd been free. Now they both were free and utterly alone.